All right, well, here we are again, our series In Love for Life, Building or Rebuilding a Great Marriage. This is lesson number 6, the money trap, I hope everybody's got their worksheets to follow along. Well, as the title suggests, I want to talk about money, a very important issue in marriage. You know, people have different attitudes about money when they come into a marriage, and a lot of times the collision of two ideas about money within a marriage creates a lot of stress. Some researchers have found that money issues, and especially how money is handled, is responsible for up to 70% of marital conflicts. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, for this type of conflict over money. One, people have different ideas and different training about money, and they bring those into their relationship. For example, you know, she may come from a family where money was tight, where you budgeted carefully, you know, money was for saving, for planning, so on and so forth. You know, she comes from that background, she has that ideology. And he, you know, the husband, he comes from a family where, you know, they didn't worry about money. You know, we live from day to day, money's for spending, you know, tomorrow, mañana, no problem. Well, when you take these two people and their ideas about money and you put them in a relationship and they have to begin dealing with their pooled resources, you know, many times it causes a problem. Another reason that there are money issues or money conflicts in a marriage is because there's no discussion about money before marriage, and so many times it comes as a nasty surprise. Oh, I didn't know you were like this, or I didn't know you were like that. You know, we don't talk about money, we have no idea about how our partner uses money or thinks about money, and when you're in the marriage and you have to actually deal with real money and real budgets, that also can be an issue of conflict. And then of course, different economic backgrounds. Not just how we think about money, but you know, he comes from perhaps a poor lower middle class home, or not a poor lower middle class, but he may come from a poor home. She may come from a home where her father was a professional, a doctor, a lawyer, something like that. They had more money to spend, better college education, so on and so forth. So you know, when you have people coming from different socioeconomic classes and they marry, then there is also the potential for conflict in marriage. So the conflict in a relationship over money usually centers around two main factors, and that is earning power, in other words, the ability to make money, and lifestyle, and that is the style of living that we think or that we hope or that we believe that we should have. And so the idea or the conflict is the way we use or misuse money is based largely on these two factors, earning power and lifestyle. And it works something like this. If our earning power can supply our lifestyle, there's no problem. You usually can work it out. I mean, if there's enough money to go around to buy and save and budget and, you know, and even do a little bit of crazy shopping and so on and so forth, there's no problem. However, if our earning power cannot supply our lifestyle, then this will create problems that will produce pressure within all of our relationships, especially within marriage. You know, there's not enough money to go around. There's not enough money for the vacation and the savings. You know, how are we going to handle that? So this financial pressure, or this type of financial pressure, is the result of what I call the money trap. That's why we call this lesson the money trap. So here's the money trap. Here's how it works in a normal couple's life. Now, before we have any earning power, when I talk about earning power, I mean before we have some sort of training as far as a trade is concerned, or a vocation or business or experience or training or education, you know, before we have, that's where your earning power is, right? It's based on your training, based on your education. Well, before any of that is actually, gained in the individual, acquired by the individual, our concepts of lifestyle are actually already being formed. In other words, our concept of how we should live is being formed by two different forces, external forces and internal forces, okay? So let me talk about the external forces that are shaping what we think about money long before we actually have the ability to make money. So one of the external forces that shape our thinking about money is how our parents lived and their attitude towards money. In other words, what we were taught about money growing up. That's one of the external pressures or forces that shapes our thinking about money. Another one is the phenomenon of easy credit. I know that in this financial climate, we talk about credit being a little tighter, but we live in an era where credit is really pretty easy to get. It's one of the most powerful external forces today when it comes to finance. Didn't exist roughly 100 years ago. Credit existed 100 years ago, but the ease of credit did not exist 100 years ago. 100 years ago, an 18-year-old just couldn't go in and buy clothes and shoes and all kinds of things and just sign for it and walk out. You couldn't do that 100 years ago. The idea of exchanging future work for goods now on a consumer level was not as widespread 100 years ago as it is today. Today, we're almost a cashless society, right? Debit cards, credit cards. We exchange work that we'll do in the future for goods that we will receive now. And that's an external force that forms our ideas about money and finance. And then the other external force or pressure is the abundance and the variety of merchandisers and merchandise. In other words, there's so much stuff to look at and buy. Again, something that did not exist 100 years ago. You had a catalog, you had the Sears catalog that was mailed out, and that was, wow, that was a lot to look at. Today, have you gone to shopping malls? Have you gone to stores? There are stores upon stores upon stores that sell all kinds of merchandise, 50 different types of one thing. So we have a lot to choose from and a lot to purchase. All right, so those are some of the external forces that form our ideas about money. Early experiences and training, easy credit, and the abundance and accessibility to merchandise in our day and age. There are also some internal forces that form or shape our thinking about money. Many of them are negative. I'll only talk about the negative ones because these are the ones that get us into trouble. Now, there are key advertising approaches that kind of push our buttons, our internal buttons, to get us to buy, to get us to commit, to get us to engage financially. And I want to share some of these with you. For example, we talk about greed. Greed is really the idea of never having enough. That's a certain button in us. That's a certain hot button, the greed button. And marketers, when they say, hey, look, we have something new, something, a whole lot better, the new and improved, whatever it is, that appeals to that thing inside of us that wants more. We never have quite enough. We want the newest thing. Another internal force, another button that gets pushed is jealousy, for example. Jealousy is wanting what others have. So how do you think marketers push that button, which motivates us to engage financially? Well, they say, you know what? You too can have. They have this, but you too can have. As a matter of fact, you ought to have this thing. The button of pride, competing with others. Car companies are great with this. You can have the best, the very best. You deserve the very best. And if you purchase this thing, you will be known as an individual who has the very best. Not like these other cars. This car, this particular model, This is the best. It says something about you, that you are better than other people. It's amazing how that button gets pushed through various advertising. Laziness, for example, our lazy button, it's getting something without any effort. It's the basis of gambling. It's with little effort, we think we're going to win an inordinate amount of money or goods. Well, marketing, pushes that lazy button when it tells us it's easy. It's easy, just come on in. I heard a commercial the other day that says, this is how easy it is to get a brand new, $40,000 truck. We'll pay off your old car. We'll pay off your credit card debts. We'll do this, it's easy. You just sign. You just sign and walk away. No down payment. We'll make it easy, no work involved, no commitment. The lack of self-control button, which a lot of us have. The impulse buying, luxury buying. Usually the impulse button is pushed when marketers are saying, you got to do this now. I mean, it's probably one of the oldest sales gimmicks. You got to do it now. I'm showing you the sale that we have, and this car or this thing is available, and it's only today. Because if you don't get it today, you'll never have this ever again. You've just got to decide right now. And all that's doing is pushing our impulse button. And then of course the selfishness button, the interest in our own needs, in our own self. Usually the approach there is, be the first. This is an exclusive offer. No one can have it. This is a limited edition, and if you get this thing, you are going to be among the very few in the whole world that will have this particular thing. We don't understand many times that commercial is playing for a couple of million people at the same time. Nevertheless, it makes us feel that we're the only ones that will have this thing. And then, of course, the trap. This is how the trap is sprung. Our society bombards us with media images of the ideal lifestyle that usually contains all these things that we should have and possess. It creates for us the style it says that we deserve or we should have, and if not properly trained in money management and common sense, we believe it. We believe what they're saying. We buy it. I don't just mean we buy the thing, we buy the dream, we buy the image that they're saying. Now the code words used appeal to our inward forces by saying, you deserve the best and you should get it now. And it's easy, and you'll be the first, and you'll be the only, and so on, and so on, and so on, day after day after day. I mean, you can't go anywhere where you're not bombarded with merchandising images. Why do you think there's so many car commercials on radio on Labor Day? Because we're off from work, we're not listening to the radio usually when we're at work, but we're on a day off. I don't know about you, but you're in the garage, you're out in the yard, you got the radio on, you're listening to it, and they're just bombarding you with ads. After the 10,000th ad about how easy and you should, eventually they start breaking you down. And then goods are made accessible everywhere to provide this ideal lifestyle and to make it easy to respond. All you have to do is pick up the phone. So you have the images of the ideal lifestyle and all the reasons why you should have it. And then accessibility, it's easy. You go in and you just look online, you pick out the furniture you want, they'll deliver it to your house, no down payment, no payments till next year. How easy could this be? How accessible is all this material? Just hit the button. And then, of course, as I mentioned, easy credit. Easy credit makes all of these things available to everyone, even those who can't afford it. And those are the ones usually who are caught in the trap. One of the big problems here in the United States in the last couple of years, the housing bubble, the housing crash. It's very simple. People bought houses that they just couldn't afford. They buy $300,000–400,000 houses when they had like $35,000 salary. There's no way that they could afford it. Well, they could just barely afford it. But if something happened, If they needed money for something else, a medical bill or car breakdown, the minute that fine balance was broken, they had no reserve. They'd lose their houses. And so these forces begin to work together and they create this vicious cycle. We see, we want, and easy credit enables us to get it. And so the slogan for our society should be, get it with credit. Get it with credit. Now, I want you to understand, I'm not against, I'm not railing against our capitalistic system and so on, merchandise. I'm not railing against that. I'm not against a strong economy, an efficient network of merchandising and distribution, and even a banking system that allows us to use credit wisely as a tool for establishing our homes and our businesses. Hallmarks of good stewardship, or these are hallmarks of good stewardship in a well-run society. So I'm not against those things. The point I'm trying to make here is that in order to avoid being crushed in this system of ours, we should realize that our lifestyle should be based on our earning power, not how much our parents earned or how our parents lived, or not based on how we would like to live, and not based on what television says we should live or how we should live, not based on how our friends live, but based on our earnings. And that is a very sobering thought indeed. A lot of young couples today, they look at their parents and they see, well, my parents have a 3,000 square foot house and they've got a yard and they've got a pool and they've got 2 cars and they've got a condo in Florida. They're looking at that and they think, wow, well, when I'm 29 years old, this is what I should have too, because my parents have it, I should have it. And they don't realize many times that their parents may have worked for 30 years in order to accumulate this type of wealth. And so they use credit unwisely to establish a lifestyle like they think they ought to have or should have or deserve. And that lifestyle is not based on reality, the reality of their earning power. So, society combined with internal and external forces creates the image of a lifestyle we think we should have. We believe this ideal, and instead of basing our lifestyle on our own earning power, we use easy credit to obtain the lifestyle we think we should have. So we get into all kinds of debt, and debt causes pressure in our relationship. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And I want to concentrate less on the economics of it and concentrate a little bit more now from here on in on the pressure that is exerted on the relationship because of finances. Now, financial pressure has many symptoms in a relationship. Fatigue, for example, physical and emotional fatigue. The weight of debt causes depression in people. Indebtedness is a weight. If you don't believe me, try remembering how it felt when you paid off your car, or you paid off your house, or you paid off your student loan. How did you feel the day when you got that notice in the mail? Thank you very much, your house is paid off, your car is paid off, here's the lien release from the bank, you now own your car. Don't you feel, kind of a burden's been lifted off of you? Well, if you feel a burden's been lifted off of you when you pay off a legitimate debt, can you imagine how much too much debt weighs? If there's a feeling of relief when it's gone, it must mean that there was a feeling of pressure when it was there. So fatigue, emotional fatigue is one of the symptoms of financial pressure. Obsession. We think and we talk only about money and money problems. A lot of the couples report that their discussions are always about money. If they're planning something to do with the children, instead of just making the plan, will it be good for the kids and so on and so forth, it becomes, can we afford this? Well, we're going to have to be able to pay that off before we can do this and so on and so forth. And so we become obsessed. The debates and the arguments are always about money. And of course, arguments start because we need to find the blame. Who's responsible for the financial mess that we're in? And a lot of times the blame is, you spend too much, or the reverse of that. You don't make enough. Or maybe if you got another job, or maybe if you tried harder at work. And so there are arguments about who is responsible for the difficulty. Also, sexual disinterest. Let's face it, it's very hard to be intimate with someone that you've lost respect for. If you don't respect somebody, it's very hard to feel very close to them, and usually sexual intimacy requires that you actually feel close to that individual. Financial ruin. Eventually you have no more credit, just debts, and debts that you can't pay. And financial ruin many times leads to family ruin. And then of course, there is spiritual discouragement, especially for those who are believers. The feeling that God doesn't love you, or He's punishing you because of your financial ruin. Now, pressure of this kind, as I mentioned, can easily destroy a relationship. So that's why we're talking in this In Love for Life series. That's why we're talking about money, because money problems have a tremendous effect on the quality of one's relationship in marriage. Now, there are a lot of financial advisors and plans, but you need to be careful not to make matters worse. Not all financial solutions are equal. And I've seen a lot of people, they get into financial trouble, and instead of fixing it or doing the things they need to do to make it better, they actually make it worse. So here are some bad solutions, okay? Let me preface this part by saying, bad solution. These are bad solutions to money problems, and I'll show you bad solutions through the images of animals. Okay, you'll get what I'm trying to do here in a minute. So one of the bad solutions is what I call the ostrich solution. The ostrich solution is the following: just refuse to admit that there is a problem. If you ignore the problem, it'll just go away. Let's not even talk about money. Let's forget about that. We don't talk about that type of thing. It reminds me of a cousin of mine long ago when I was a young guy. He bought a car. He bought a brand new Camaro, a yellow Camaro, canary yellow, I remember. We were all jealous of him because he had this nice new car. And his name was Angelo, and he would drive around and so on and so forth, but Angelo was a very carefree individual, so if he wanted to go to the movies, he'd go downtown to the movies. Oh, there was a parking spot in front of the theater. He'd just park the car there and just walk into the theater, whatever. And then he'd come out and there'd be a ticket on his, because he never looked at no parking, none of that, handicap zone, nothing. He just parked it wherever he felt like it. And so he'd take the ticket and then he'd just open his glove compartment in the car and he'd put it in there. And this is serious. He did this for a couple of years. And he had a stack of tickets. He figured, nobody's calling me, I haven't been arrested, it's just paperwork, they'll forget about it. Well, they don't forget about it. And so one day, he's driving along, maybe I think he was speeding or done something, and the policeman stopped him. And when he checked, he realized that he had all of these outstanding tickets, thousands and thousands of dollars, of accrued interest and penalties and so on. So they seized his car and he went to court. And the thing about Angelo is most of his salary, went to pay for his car. He didn't have a lot of extra, lived with his parents. And so in the end, at court, he had to give up the car. They impounded the car, they kept the car in order to pay off all of his tickets, all of his fines. And he is the perfect example of the ostrich method. I have a financial problem, I just ignore it. It's like it doesn't exist. Well, we know that ignored problems simply grow worse with time. Another bad solution is the chicken solution. The chicken solution is what I call escape therapy. We have money problems and all kinds of problems like that. Let's just take a vacation. Or let's go out shopping, buy something new, feel good about going. Don't you feel good when you go shopping? Let's do that. Let's just go shopping, we'll feel great. I call that the chicken solution. Refusing to face the truth, substituting a pleasant, running away from the problem, you know what I'm saying? And it'll make me feel better. Now, this is only a temporary solution at best. You only feel good for a little while you're shopping. It usually creates more debt, and it's fatalistic. In the end, we're all going to die, or we may go bankrupt, or they may come and get it, and so what? Let's spend some more money and feel good while we're able. The other solution, bad solution, I call the parakeet solution. Parakeets, they repeat over and over again the same thing. Well, the parakeet solution is when we repeat the same mistake. Do you have a lot of debts? Well, here's the parakeet solution. Just, consolidate everything into one big, huge debt. And then, you'll be solved. You'll just have one little payment. But we don't realize that in doing that, we've just repeated the problem. We're not addressing the debt. All we're doing is giving ourselves a chance to keep spending. Because usually what happens when people consolidate their debt, they now have one payment against all those old debts, but they haven't changed anything in their lifestyle, and they usually continue to make other indebtedness. And so now what they end up with is they have one large debt, and they're creating new and smaller debts in addition to the big one. Why? Why do I call it the parakeet? They're simply repeating the same mistake over and over again. Then we have the horse solution. Do you have a lot of debt? Man, just work like a horse to get rid of it. Get a second job, do overtime, let your wife get a job too, put the kids into daycare, maybe she can get a job on the weekend on top of her regular job, more hours at work, away from the house. Does that really solve the problem? Because more hours away from one another, more hours away from the home, and so on and so forth, simply creates more pressure on the couple who is already under pressure because of financial indebtedness. And then there's the spider solution. Like the black widow spider, that eats its mate. Well, the spider solution is, hey, how about just eliminating the seeming cause of my problem, and that is you. You spend too much, so here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to get rid of you. Now we know that this really doesn't eliminate the problem, it merely creates more problems and more indebtedness. I have news for you. There's no such thing as a budget divorce. You see these signs sometimes, it said, uncontested divorce, $240 or $180, budget divorce, cheap divorce. No such thing as a cheap or budget divorce. Maybe you might pay less as far as money is concerned to process paperwork, but I guarantee you that there is always an incredibly high emotional and spiritual cost to a divorce. So most people who are continually in financial trouble are so because they refuse to base their lifestyle on their salaries, and then they're in the trap. And when they get into the trap, they go deeper into the trap by using some of these poor financial solutions to get out of trouble that I've just shown you. Well, we can't just show bad solutions. Let's try to show some good solutions, because there are good problem-solving methods for financial difficulties. For example, first of all, establish your style of living based on your current earning power and not your future earning power. If you're going to get the raise in 6 months from now, in the promotion they've promised you, don't start spending that money until you actually have the raise. Continue to live on the money that you make now, not the money you wish you had, that you think you're going to have, that they've promised that you will get. Don't do that. In this way, you will have a better chance to be free from debt and the financial pressure that comes from debt. In Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, Solomon writes, "Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender." Proverbs 22, verse 7. You know, there's a whole lesson that we could make just on this scripture. If we could learn just this one thing, we would be free. So would our country be free. That's one of the reasons why many in our country are saying we have to be careful. We're having way too much debt in our country, and other people, you know, own our debt. The borrower is always the slave to the lender. Now, this idea, you know, establish your style of living based on your current earning power, it sounds good, and I don't think anyone here would disagree with that, but it's not easy to do. This practice requires certain things. First of all, it requires honesty with yourself. You have to be honest. You have to be realistic about what you can afford. I mean, again, no one disagrees with that, but it's so hard to actually put it into practice. To be honest about your financial capability. Can I or can I not afford this car, this house, this activity, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, self-control, saying no to yourself, saying no to your impulses. Very, very, very difficult. But these things, honesty and self-control, are necessary if you're going to practice financial moderation. Another thing that is necessary is alertness. In other words, be aware of the trap. Advertisers, for example, know that women make or influence most of the money decisions in the home, and this is why ads are usually directed at them primarily. You need to know that. You know, all the buttons that I talked to you about, you need to be aware that advertisers have only one thing in their minds. They want you to buy their stuff. And they're not caring if it's something you need or you don't need, if it's something you can afford or you can't afford. That doesn't calculate in their, in their calculations, in their plan. Their plan is to get as many people as possible to buy their product. That's not evil, I mean, that's just business, right? So you have to be the one to know yourself, to know when you're purchasing out of pride or you're purchasing out of impulse and so on and so forth, rather than purchasing on a real need based on affordability. And I might say, I said women, advertisings are, a lot of them are focused on women, but men also are targeted for advertising in a certain way because advertisers know that men are greater impulse buyer than women. Women, they like to shop, they like to look, they want to look. Even if a woman goes into a store, she wants to look at something, even if she finds it right away, the thing she's looking for, she's still going to browse around and look at things before she finally settles. Men are not like that, right? We know that. I mean, men, there's a reason why they put the men's department right away when you walk into a store, a big department store. And the reason for that is that men will not ask for directions and climb 6 flights of stairs to find the men's department. If they don't find it right away, they're done. They look at stuff, they like it, they want to buy it. It's impulse buying. And marketers know this. Another thing too is that men usually buy more expensive things. They buy less quantity of things, but they're the ones that buy the really expensive things, the boat, the new car, the Sea-Doo or whatever it is. They buy the big toys, and a lot of times men are motivated to purchase through pride. The marketers appeal to their pride. Oh, my hero. Sometimes I hear people when they come in with a brand new car, they're congratulated. Congratulations on your new car. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, bought a brand new Buick. Yeah, well, congratulations. Congratulations, you just spent 40,000 bucks, you're in debt for the next 7 years for this vehicle. I don't get the congratulations part. But marketers understand that. And then another thing that is required if you're going to put this idea of living and buying based on your earning power, honesty, self-control, be alert, know what's going on, and then learn to be content. We should learn to be satisfied with what we have, knowing that God is the one who provided it, whatever that is. I want to read a passage out of 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul talks about this idea. And he writes this 2,000 years ago, and yet it is so apropos for our time today. He says, but godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we have brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil, and some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many, many griefs. And so Paul says we should learn to be satisfied with what we have, based on the idea that this is what God has given us. If we have enough to provide an honorable life, he says, food and clothing and housing, if we can live in an honorable way, then we should have enough. And wanting more than this can be risky at times. The art of being content with what we have at the moment is actually the gateway to freedom and peace of mind and true enjoyment of life. Because contentment eliminates greed and pride, all those inner pressures. All those inner fleshly pressures are there because for one reason or another, we're not content with what we have. Now, some people think that contentment means settling. I'll just settle for what I've got, that's it. Who wants to try? I'm not going to try anymore. That's settling, based on laziness, I think. Contentment is, God has given me what I have today, and I will give thanks for it. It doesn't mean that I cannot strive to improve my lot, to make things better. It doesn't mean that. But it means, but right here and right now and right today, I will learn to be content with what I have been given and what I have, even if I realize there may be margin for improvement. And the way to contentment is through the practice of thanksgiving. If you just list the things that you actually have and give thanks for those things, God enables you to have contentment for what you have. Paul says in Romans first chapter that the first sin, the first level of sin is that men refuse to give thanks. And then from there they just, a downward spiral. But the opposite is true also. The way to move upward spiritually is to begin by giving thanks for what we have today. Not praying for stuff that we might get in the future, but rather have a prayer that gives thanks for the actual things that we have today. And so for men the trick, of course, for men, males, is to be realistic about what we truly can afford to buy. And for women, the true challenge of submission is to respect and live within their husband's or primary earner's earning power. That's how we arrive at contentment. Now, another good problem-solving technique for financial stress, aside from living within your earning power, right? We said we're going to live within our earning power, and that requires us certain things that we have to do. Another thing that we can do that helps us to live within our earning power is to create a budget, make financial priorities. In other words, establish priorities for the way that you're going to spend the money that you do have. For example, here are some of the priorities that we should have financially. One of them is we ought to give the first portion of whatever we make to God. Again, I want to read a proverb here. Proverb chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. Solomon says, honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce. So your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. So here you have an instruction and a promise. The instruction is give to God the first portion of all that you have, whatever it is. No matter how small or large, give Him the first portion. Notice he doesn't say give Him half, or give Him 10%, or give Him 70%. He doesn't say that. He says give Him the first portion. Give Him the first slice off the top before you give to anything else. Taxes, rent, saving, the first portion goes to the Lord. He says, do that. And then there's a promise. The promise is, if you do that, then God will bless you in a financial way. You see, when you give the first portion to God, He blesses the entire amount. And the entire amount becomes holy as if you gave Him the entire amount, as if you gave Him the entire amount. See what I'm saying? I mean, God deserves to receive everything that we have. Really, He does. He is worthy that whatever I make, whatever I have, I should offer it to Him, all of it, because He's worthy of that. But God understands that I need stuff. I need to eat and live and so on and so on. I need to drive a car. And so He says, well, here's what we'll do. You give me the first portion and I will bless the entire amount as if you had given me the entire amount. And not only that, I will give you the ability to use what's left in the best of ways. Okay? So when you give the first portion, He gives you the wisdom to manage the rest. When you do this, what happens is that you express your trust in Him to provide. I mean, credit limits are not financial protection. God is your financial protection. He's the one that protects you. Our security is not that we have like a government job or a government pension. A lot of people say, I got a government job and I got a government pension, I'm set for life, that's my security. No, our security is Jesus Christ, the Lord. That's our security. That I have a secure job with the government and a secure pension, that's called a blessing from God. That's not called security. Another thing that we need to do, as far as making financial priorities, giving the first portion to God, is to establish a reasonable budget. If you establish a reasonable budget, then you will be able to manage the rest of your income in a wise way, not forgetting to provide for your family. I have here just a very simple budget guideline worked out by Christian economists. Some people are shocked, but I've seen it work in many homes when it has been, where it has been tried. And basically this budget here says, you put your gross income, and I think everybody's got a copy of this worksheet. Those people who are watching this on DVD, this worksheet and all other worksheets are available online. You just download them if you need to. So this guideline budget, you put your gross income, the total income from everything you get. You're still working, but you're collecting part of a pension, all of that. That's all in the pile, okay? Then what you do is you take God's part first, percentage of that gross, whatever that is. The Bible in the Old Testament said 10%, but you decide. It's a portion that you give. 10% was a guideline. You know why 10%? Because when we give 10% off the top to God, it requires sacrifice. That's why. 10%, giving at the 10% level is the beginning of sacrifice. It gets harder and harder if you go to 12, 15, 20%. But at 10% is the threshold for sacrifice. It costs you really something to be able to give God 10% of your gross. Then of course, taxes and all those type of things have to be taken out. And then the net spending income is based on a percentage. In other words, you shouldn't spend more than a certain amount of percentage on certain items. So housing and all that goes with that should not be more than 32% of your net income. Food 15%, auto 15%, insurance, debts, and so on and so forth. It's not based on a number, it's based on a percentage. So the more money you make, for example, then the more actual money you have to spend on each different category. All right? So if you are living according to your means, in other words, you're living based on your earnings, then this is a wise way to divide that money to enable you to have some sort of financial balance. All right, so let's have a bit of a summary here, if you wish, for this lesson. Listen, we're devoting one lesson to this topic, and there are many seminars where you have an entire weekend when you're talking just about money, but I think we've kind of touched some of the high points here, some of the important points. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. So let's summarize. First of all, if you spend more than you earn, you are in debt, and debts cause pressure, especially in a marriage relationship. Secondly, there are positive and negative ways of dealing with this kind of financial pressure. And we've talked about the negative ways. You can ignore it, you can try to escape it, you can try to increase your workload, you can divorce your partner and do all kinds of things, but those solutions simply create more problems and more pressure. And then, of course, there are some more positive solutions. You can exercise honesty, realize this is how much I make, this is where I'm at, this is how much I can spend. You can exercise self-control, don't let those buttons get pushed. Don't respond in that way. You can cultivate contentment through thanksgiving and the recognition of what God has given you. And of course, doing these things will mean that hopefully you'll be able to live within your means. Again, today, I live within my means today. If I want to, if I am able, I'm always working to improve my means if I wish. Thankfully, the wonderful thing about this country is that we can do that. We can make the effort to improve our situation. All right? And so this contentment, as I was saying, in living within your means, and this can be done, all of us can do this, and all of us can start doing this regardless of where we're at in our life cycle. You can begin this by, of course, giving God the first portion in everything. Remember, a lot of times we're holding back from God, and He knows it. Even if no one else knows it, He knows what we're holding back from Him. There's great relief, there's great praise, and there's great satisfaction in knowing that we're giving God a portion of everything that we have. There's a marvelous sense of freedom and trust that comes when we reach that level. So we give God the first portion of everything, and then we trust Him to help us manage the rest. Good management begins with a reasonable budget. And of course, I give you the budget, those figures, they're helping us get some approximations, all right? Giving us guidelines on how we can do this. So I encourage us, all of us, singles, widows, married couples, everyone, I encourage us not to get caught in the money trap and allow Satan a foothold in our emotional lives, in our financial lives, and of course in our married lives through the misuse of money. Well, that's our lesson for today. I appreciate everyone following along, and we'll be back next time with lesson number 7 in our series, In Love for Life, Building or Rebuilding a Great Marriage. Thank you very much.